A little boy walked into a flower shop clutching a few coins. He wanted to buy a single rose for his mother, who hadn't smiled in a long time. The gloomy shop assistant refused to sell the flower because he didn't have enough money. Suddenly, Keanu Reeves appeared in the store. His reaction and action will change the boy's life forever and will make you believe that there is still room for good in the world. Friends, let us know in the comments under what conditions you watch this video. In the background, while working, or during lunch. Also, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow another emotional story will be waiting for you. A spring evening was settling over the city, filling it with freshness and a light scent of blooming flowers. Streetlights flickered with a warm yellow glow, reflecting on the damp sidewalks after a recent rain. The air was infused with mixed aromas. Somewhere, the rich smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted from a small cafe. Nearby, the sweetness of pastries from a bakery. And just a few steps away, the delicate fragrance of flowers seeped through the open doors of a tiny flower shop. People bustled through the streets, wrapped in light jackets, hurrying about their business. Some were returning from work, others carrying shopping bags, and some simply strolling, savoring the first warm days of spring. No one paid attention to the small figure standing by the entrance of the flower shop. A boy, around 8 years old, stood with his head bowed, carefully examining something in his trembling hands. His worn-out jacket seemed a little too big, as if it had been handed down from an older brother or bought with room to grow. His sneakers, frayed at the edges, had long lost their sturdiness, but he paid no mind to the lingering chill of the evening, still present after the long winter. His thin fingers sifted through a few coins in his palm, as if trying to calculate something of great importance. From time to time, he furrowed his brow in concentration, his lips trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from nervous anticipation. It was precisely this expression on the boy's face that caught the attention of Keanu Reeves, who happened to be passing by. Keanu loved evenings like this. He rarely indulged in the bustling city life, preferring to blend in with ordinary people, unnoticed. He walked unhurriedly, his hands tucked into the pockets of his light spring jacket, inhaling the fresh air, scented with wet asphalt and the first blossoms of the season. And that was when he saw him, the small boy, frozen in place before the flower shop. His gaze, fixated on the coins in his hands, radiated anxiety, confusion, and yet a quiet determination. This was not just a child who had stopped randomly in front of a store. He had a purpose, something important to him. Keanu slowed his pace. He didn't know why, but something about this moment struck him. He had seen many different people, thousands of faces, and had learned to recognize pain even in its smallest expressions. Something told him that there was a story here, one he needed to hear. The boy carefully counted his coins one last time, sighed, and gathering his courage, stepped into the shop. Keanu hesitated for a moment before following. His intuition, his quiet inner voice, nudged him forward. He gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. The shop was filled with the scent of fresh flowers. Roses, lilies, and chrysanthemums blended into a pleasant, yet slightly sharp fragrance. Potted plants lined the shelves, while carefully arranged bouquets, tied with ribbons, lay on the counter. The shop was small but cozy, though a heavy atmosphere hung in the air, perhaps due to the exhausted woman behind the counter. The florist, a woman in her 50s, looked tired. She flipped through the pages of a notebook, occasionally glancing at the clock as if counting the minutes until closing time. There was an indifference in her eyes, not a cruel one, but the kind that settles in people who have long grown accustomed to monotony and lost the ability to notice the little things. A few other customers were in the store, 2 women quietly discussing bouquets, a young man browsing potted plants. But no one paid attention to the boy, who hesitated near the counter, clutching his coins tightly. Keanu felt a strange sense of anticipation stirring within him. He watched as the boy shifted his gaze from the roses to his money, nervously tightening his grip, swallowing hard as if gathering his resolve. This was the first clear sign of a problem, one the boy had yet to voice. Keanu remained near the entrance, observing. He didn't want to interfere, not yet. But he knew this story was just beginning. The boy, holding his breath for a moment, took a few hesitant steps forward. His small fingers gripped the coin so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He approached the counter and looked up at the florist. "Excuse me, may I have one rose?" His voice was quiet, slightly nervous. The woman lifted her head from her notebook, quickly glanced at him, but said nothing. Mechanically, she reached for a bucket of roses, pulled one out, wrapped it in thin paper, and placed it in front of him. $3, she said curtly. The boy stretched out his coins, and the woman began to count. After a few seconds, she raised her eyebrows sharply and crossed her arms. "This is only $2.40. That's not enough." The boy shrank. His shoulders flinched slightly. He frantically recounted his money, hoping she had made a mistake. But deep down, he knew. There was no mistake. He was 60 cents short. For a few moments, he remained silent as if thinking. Then, slowly, he lifted his gaze and quietly asked, "Could I pay a little less? I really want to buy it for my mom." The woman pursed her lips. Her voice remained cold and emotionless. "Sorry, kid, but this is a business, not a charity. If you don't have the money, I can't sell it to you." The boy swallowed hard, his eyes trembling. Shame washed over him. Shame in front of this woman, in front of the people in the store, in front of himself. He felt his ears burn, his hands begin to shake. "But it's for my mom," he whispered. "Everyone here is buying flowers for someone." The florist cut him off sharply. "I have fixed prices. I can't just give things away." The boy didn't move. His fingers unconsciously clenched the edge of the counter. He glanced at the rose once more. His throat tightened. He hadn't even noticed that people in line had started watching him. Keanu, standing nearby, saw everything. His heart ached. He noticed how the boy was trying to hold himself together, how he fought against his emotions. He wanted to be strong. He wanted to show that he wouldn't break. But his eyes betrayed him. The boy glanced at his coins one more time, as if trying to squeeze something more out of them. But it was useless. He sighed, lowered his head and whispered, "I'm sorry." Then, carefully, as if afraid to ruin the rose with a single touch, he slid it back across the counter. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he swallowed the lump in his throat. His small shoulders were tense, but he didn't allow himself to cry. "Thank you. Sorry for bothering you." Without waiting for a response, he turned and began walking slowly toward the exit. Keanu didn't take his eyes off him. This was a moment when time seemed to slow down. One look was enough for him to understand. This boy had already been through a lot in life. It wasn't just disappointment that hurt him, it was something more. As if he had just received another confirmation of what he might have already started believing, that the world is cruel to those without money. The boy was almost at the door when Keanu, without thinking, took a step forward. His instincts had never failed him, and this time he knew. He couldn't just let this boy walk away as if nothing had happened. Keanu quickly took a few steps forward and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. The small body flinched slightly in surprise, but the boy didn't pull away. Slowly, he turned his head, and his large, dark eyes met Keanu's warm, kind gaze. "Hey, kid," Keanu said softly, leaning down slightly so their eyes were on the same level. "I saw you wanted to buy a rose. Is it for someone special?" The boy hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether he could trust this stranger. But there was no mockery in his voice, no condescension, only genuine interest. For my mom, he finally whispered, lowering his gaze to the coins in his hands. She gets really tired at work, and she hasn't smiled in a long time. The last words were barely audible, as if the boy didn't even want to hear them himself. Keanu noticed how he pressed his lips together, trying to keep his emotions in check. "That's really kind of you," Keanu said gently. "Do you buy her flowers often?" The boy shook his head. "No, I wanted to do it for the first time." After a pause, he added, "We don't have money for things like that." Keanu felt something shift in his chest. These simple words, spoken in a calm, almost casual tone, hit him harder than any dramatic story ever could. "Where did you get this money?" Keanu asked, nodding toward the handful of coins in the boy's hands. The boy hesitated, as if this moment was even more painful for him. "I washed car headlights in the parking lot," he said carefully, stealing a glance at Keanu, as if afraid of judgment. "Not everyone liked it. Some people yelled at me, but some gave me coins if I did a good job." Keanu felt his heart clench with both sadness and admiration. This child wasn't begging. He had worked. He wanted to earn, not just receive. But Keanu also saw there was more to the story. He crouched down to be at the boy's level and gently asked, "Kid, what else happened? You're not this upset just because of the flowers." The boy stiffened. His lips trembled slightly, and his fingers tightened around the coins. It was clear that he didn't want to talk, that he was used to hiding his feelings. But now, in front of him, stood someone who wasn't looking away. Someone who wasn't just going to nod and walk past. "It's okay," the boy muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. Even he didn't believe what he had just said. "I'm sure you're strong," Keanu said softly. "But sometimes, even strong people need help. Am I right?" The boy stared at him silently. His chest rose and fell with quick, uneven breaths. Then, as if unable to hold it in any longer, he lowered his head and whispered, "My dad. He got hurt at work. He can't work anymore. And now Mom has to do everything. Pay for food. Take care of my little sister." Keanu's heart clenched even tighter. "You have a sister?" he asked gently. The boy nodded. "She's 2 years old. Mom barely sleeps. She works all day, and then comes home and does everything else. I just wanted to make her happy. I wanted her to have a good day." His voice cracked. He quickly fell silent, clenching his jaw to keep the tears from escaping. He was ashamed. He didn't want to seem weak. Keanu exhaled quietly. He didn't need to hear anything else. This child, this boy, wasn't just another kid in a tough situation. He was a fighter, a little man who, despite everything, thought not of himself, but of his family. Keanu ran a hand along his chin, thinking for a moment. He knew exactly what to do. "Listen, buddy," he said after a short pause. "I think your mom is really lucky to have a son like you." The boy didn't answer, only shrugged slightly. Keanu smiled. "You know what? Let's make sure this day really is special for her." Keanu paused for a second, then straightened up and walked decisively toward the florist. The woman still looked slightly irritated, but under his steady gaze, she composed herself. A silent question lingered in her eyes, but Keanu didn't leave her wondering for long. "Please, give this boy the most beautiful bouquet in your shop," he said confidently. The florist glanced at him, then at the boy, who stood frozen, his gaze shifting between them in shock. She narrowed her eyes slightly, as if debating whether to comply. She had likely encountered enough customers trying to haggle or argue over prices. But now, standing before her, was Keanu Reeves, and there was a calm yet firm certainty in his voice that made refusing seem pointless. "All right," she replied shortly, and walked over to the flowers. She selected a large bouquet of fresh roses, tied them with a red ribbon, and held them out to Keanu. But before he could take them, the boy, who had been standing in a daze, suddenly spoke up. "No." His voice carried a trace of fear. I can't accept this." The florist paused, raising an eyebrow in surprise. Keanu, however, just smiled gently. "Why not?" he asked, leaning slightly toward the boy. The boy clenched his fists tightly. "Mom says nothing comes for free," he answered hesitantly. "She says you have to earn everything honestly." His voice grew quieter, and he lowered his gaze to the floor. It was as if he was afraid of offending Keanu with his refusal, but at the same time, couldn't betray the values his mother had taught him. Keanu studied him for a few seconds, then smiled warmly. "Your mom is a very wise woman," he said. "And I think you're absolutely right." The boy looked up at him again, surprise and curiosity flickering in his eyes. "So here's the deal," Keanu continued. "I'll buy this bouquet, and in return, you have to do something kind for someone who needs it this week. What do you say?" The boy looked stunned. He glanced at the bouquet again, then back at Keanu, as if trying to make sure he was serious. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Something kind?" he repeated, as if tasting the words. "Yes," Keanu confirmed. "That will be our exchange. I help you today, and you help someone else tomorrow." The boy thought for a moment, but something new flickered in his eyes. A sense of responsibility. He didn't want to take the bouquet for nothing. But this was fair. He took a deep breath and nodded firmly. "All right, I promise." Keanu paid for the bouquet, then handed it to the boy. He took it carefully, as if afraid to damage the delicate petals. His hands trembled slightly, and his face reflected a mix of amazement and overwhelming happiness. "Thank you," he whispered, clutching the bouquet. Keanu just winked at him. "Don't thank me. Thank your mom when you give her these flowers. And don't forget your promise, okay?" The boy nodded, this time with certainty. He stood there, holding the bouquet tightly, his face glowing with something real and sincere. And Keanu knew. This evening wouldn't just change the boy's life, but also the life of someone he would help next. The boy looked at Keanu once more, tightened his grip on the bouquet, and unable to hold back his emotions any longer, broke into a wide smile. "Thank you," he exclaimed, and without waiting for a response, turned and dashed toward the exit. His small feet nearly slipped on the shop's floor, and his heart felt like it was pounding in his throat. He burst onto the street, quickly disappearing into the crowd of passers-by. But Keanu watched him for a long time. The silence that followed felt unusual. The florist, who had remained cold until now, slowly turned her gaze to Keanu. There was something different in her eyes, perhaps slight confusion, perhaps even a hint of guilt. "Why did you do that?" she asked unexpectedly, nervously smoothing the hem of her apron. Keanu looked at her, his eyes still filled with warmth. "Because that boy wasn't asking for charity," he replied calmly. "He came here, ready to give the last of what he had just to make someone else happy. And that..." Keanu paused, glancing at the door where the boy had just disappeared. "That's worth more than a few dollars." The florist lowered her gaze. She didn't know what to say. It seemed like the same thoughts were running through her mind as in Keanu's. How many times had she walked past children like that boy, never paying attention? How many times could she have helped, but chose not to? Nearby, one of the customers, a man in an expensive suit, had been observing the entire scene. He stepped forward and addressed Keanu. "Why didn't you just give him the money? That would have been easier." Keanu smiled, but there was something deeper in his eyes. "Because it's not about the money," he replied. "It's about making sure that boy knows he matters, that he understands kindness exists, and that it always comes back." The man pondered this for a moment, then gave a quiet nod. The florist also said nothing more, but in her gaze, Keanu saw something new. Reflection, perhaps even regret. Keanu didn't say anything else. He glanced once more at the spot where the boy had stood, then turned toward the exit. The spring evening was fresh and quiet. People hurried about their business, unaware that something special had just happened in that little flower shop. Keanu walked down the street, unhurried, breathing in the scent of wet asphalt and blooming trees. After a few blocks, he stopped. On the steps of a nearby building sat the same boy. He held the bouquet, carefully smoothing the petals of the roses with his fingers. It was clear he was waiting for someone. Keanu slowed his pace and sat on a bench nearby, unnoticed. He didn't want to interfere, but something told him to stay. A few minutes passed, and then, at last, a woman appeared on the street. She walked with a slow, weary stride, carrying a heavy bag. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her shoulders slumped, the look of someone carrying more weight than they should. The boy instantly sprang up. "Mom!" he called out, running toward her. The woman stopped, slightly surprised, but then broke into a wide smile. Her eyes lit up with warmth as the boy took the bag from her hands and held out the bouquet of roses. "These are for you," he said. His mother hesitated, stunned. Her lips trembled, and for a moment it seemed she couldn't believe the flowers were truly for her. She looked at her son, then back at the roses, her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, and, unable to help herself, pulled him into a tight embrace. Keanu watched as a peaceful warmth spread through his chest. This was the moment that made everything worth it. The woman ran her hand through her son's hair, wiping away her joyful tears. "Where did you get these flowers?" she asked, surprised but tenderly. The boy took a small step back and gave a mischievous smile. "It's a long story, Mom, but I promise you, one day, I'll make sure you're never sad again." His mother hugged him tightly once more, and then they walked home together. She tried to take the heavy bag, but the boy stubbornly carried it himself, despite its weight. Keanu remained on the bench, watching them. When the door of their building closed behind them, he smiled quietly. He knew the world wasn't perfect, that there was too much pain and unfairness. But tonight, he was reminded of something important. Even the smallest act of kindness could change someone's life. With that thought, he got up, slipped his hands into his pockets, and strolled onward, disappearing into the evening city. A week had passed. That evening when the boy received roses for his mother had left a mark on his heart. But it wasn't just a happy memory. It was a moment that changed his outlook on life. He realized that acts of kindness not only bring joy to others, but also transform something within yourself. The next day, he went to school as usual, but something in him had shifted. He became more attentive to the people around him. He noticed an elderly neighbor standing hesitantly at the curb, afraid to cross the street as cars rushed by without slowing down. Without a second thought, the boy walked up to her and offered his help. She smiled and timidly took his hand, and when they reached the other side, her eyes sparkled with gratitude. "You're such a well-mannered boy," she said. "Your mother must be so proud of you." Those words left a warm feeling in his heart. Every day, he found new ways to do good. One day, he saw a pregnant woman struggling to carry heavy grocery bags from the supermarket. He ran up to her and shyly asked, "Can I help you?" The woman looked surprised at first, but after seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she smiled and handed him one of the bags. As they walked, she asked him about school, about his family, and he proudly talked about his little sister. "The world needs more boys like you," she said when they reached her house. The boy only shrugged, but deep inside, he felt something truly special. He realized that being kind wasn't hard at all. You just had to pay attention to others. One day, as he passed a supermarket, He noticed a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk, his head lowered. People walked past him, ignoring him as if he were invisible. The boy stopped. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a few coins, and carefully placed them in front of the man. The man looked up in surprise, then broke into a wide smile. "Thank you, kid," he said warmly. "You're a good boy." Those words stuck with the boy more than any praise he had ever received at school. Now he knew. Kindness always comes back. And most importantly, he realized that he had the power to change the world around him, even if it was through small, unnoticed acts. He hadn't forgotten his promise to Keanu. But now, it was no longer just a task for a week. It had become a part of his life. And deep down, he knew. One day, he would meet Keanu again. And when that day came, he would proudly tell him that he never stopped doing good. Be sure to share your impressions of the story in the comments, and write what conclusions you have drawn after listening to it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I wish you all a good mood, and see you in the new video tomorrow.